Prior to the fake oil shortages of the 70s and 80s, the majority of independent service stations were owned by Black people all across the nation. We had oil wells because we were relegated to living in swampland and badlands that nobody else wanted to be in. And those badlands are where the oil was. So when they went on the hunt for oil, we lived on that land and we were getting rich off of it. So because the oil companies, because white men cannot stand to see Black people succeed, they pretended to have an oil shortage in order to shut down Black service stations all across the nation. Now, why did they want to shut down Black service stations? Not just because we were making money off of gas stations and pumping gas, but because our service stations had Black mechanics there. And everybody, white people, Black people, Asian people, everyone went to the Black mechanic because Black mechanics will fix your car right. They would do it for a good price. And they would not lie to you and tell you something was wrong with your car that was not. At a service station, whenever you came in to get gas, they would check your oil, they would check your water, they would check your light bulbs on your car to make sure those things were working well. And they would listen to your car to see if it was making any noise, like your fan belt was loose or something else was wrong. They serviced your car. And because they did that, places like Goodyear, Sears, and other service places could not open up service centers and get anyone to go to them because they charged too much money. They would rip you off, and they did not give quality service. So they shut down all the Black service stations, made gas stations self-serve. So you had to go to a Sears or a Goodyear in order to get your car fixed. And you could not get your car taken care of at a service station anymore. The only place that I know of that still has service stations like that is New Jersey. So that's part of the thing. And then they also use that as an excuse to then say we have to go and do offshore drilling. When all offshore drilling did was the Black pumps were here on land, they would go out into the ocean and drill sideways under the Black people's land and get their oil without having to pay the Black people. They would also get to charge more money for offshore oil because it was more difficult to get to than they paid for drilling straight through Black people's land. So whenever Black people have done things to get rich, when God would take care of us, whenever white people would do us wrong and only let us live in swampland, then God gave us oil. And every time white men would come for us. It reminds me of when my grandfather left South Carolina. When his older brother worked hard and bought a car, the white men were jealous and they lynched his older brother, and they told the family they were coming for my grandfather next because he was hardworking and making money. So my grandfather took his brother's car and drove it to Washington, D.C. And from then on, he said, I'm from South Carolina and I'm staying from South Carolina. We have another relative in New York who changed his last name to Green because he's from South Carolina and he's staying from South Carolina because they were coming for him too. And he had to change his name to make sure they never found him. So that's one example, but there are many more. Black people used to run mom and pop grocery stores in the Black community. The corner stores that you see now that are owned by Koreans, Asians of all sorts, Vietnamese, those used to be Black operated. We were never allowed to own them. We were not allowed to buy property. We rented it, and we usually rented it from Jews. But then when Martin Luther King fought for our civil rights and integration and all kinds of things, and we were supposed to be able to buy property, they still wouldn't give us loans. So the places we had paid rent on for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, family owned, operated, we lived off of the property, we lived well. We were told by banks we didn't qualify for loans. And instead, they gave those stores that were viable in the community to Asians, to Koreans, to Vietnamese, to Chinese. And the people in the Black community were angry because their families were now no longer able to feed themselves. Their service stations had been shut down and their stores had been shut down. And these foreigners were brought in and allowed to thrive where we were trying to thrive. Segregation was good for us because no one else came in our community and we had to support each other, and we did it well until integration and until boat people came over and other people came over and they gave them everything we had. We were doing so well that white people had to flip it upside down when the so-called laws, 14th Amendment, were supposed to give us equal rights. And instead of giving us equal rights, everything was taken from us. We were better off when we had to fight for our own rights. We were better off when we had our own communities. We were better off when we did not integrate. We were better off when we were not around white people. Because when we were around white people would take the best of who we had, our best and our brightest, and the only thing they gave the folks who were not doing as well was guns and drugs. If you look at history, you'll see that's the way it was. We did well. We did better before white people were allowed to undermine everything we did. And they still do that. I would not believe in the racism of slavery and segregation if I didn't see it continuing to this day. No one would believe in the horrific things that were done in the past if they were not continuing in the present. And Black people, you need to stand up and share your stories. The fact that during the time of World War II, when you had Asians in concentration camps, you also took Black people's property too and made it illegal for us to own property after we had already owned it. We had homestead land, we owned property in Los Angeles, and then the laws changed so that white people could come and take all the land that was owned by Asians and Black people. That's a part of history that people try to forget. But we do not forget. We don't forget because it continues to this day. Every Black person should own property now, but instead our lands are taken for taxes like Native American lands were taken for taxes, and like Native American lands are being taken again. The land that is called reservations is now being forcibly split up so that individuals own it, and individuals then have to pay taxes on it so that they will lose the land. Black people have worked hard to get to where they are. Black people worked hard to do better. And every time we do better, then if you think about it, we end up training you to take our jobs. Whenever we have accomplished anything, as I have said, we had Black service stations. We had Black stores. We owned Roebuck of Sears and Roebuck was a Black person. And when Sears came in to be his partner, Sears took over, and now Sears has everything. Yes, Sears is now failing because when you kick the Black magic out of the equation, you lose everything. And that's the thing you need to understand about America. America is losing everything because Black people aren't sharing the magic the same. And because of that, it all has to come down.